Paul Saladino, a double board-certified MD, shares his insights on the importance of nutrition and the role of organs in our diet. He believes that Western medicine fails to treat the root cause of chronic illness, and that doctors are only taught to treat symptoms with medications. Paul emphasizes the importance of eating organs, which he believes have unique nutrients that can provide a more comprehensive nutritional profile than just eating muscle meat. Paul has connected with Laird Hamilton, a big wave surfer, and they share a passion for healthy living and food as the center of human health. Paul's journey to Costa Rica began when he was in Africa, where he spent time with the Hadza tribe, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes on the planet. He loves the laid-back lifestyle and the opportunity to be in nature every day. Paul's home in Costa Rica is surrounded by greenery, and he wakes up to the sound of birds chirping. He rarely wears a shirt or shoes and sleeps with his windows open. The water in his house comes from a stream, and he has no fluoride, chlorine, or pesticides in his water. He also has minimal exposure to RF and EMF, which he believes is beneficial for his health. Paul reflects on his time in the US during COVID and how he felt the need to escape the politics and chaos. He recalls a time when he was surfing in San Diego and the beaches were closed, and he decided to foil board in a reservoir, which led to a policeman trying to give him a ticket.
Sean Ryan asks Paul about his experience with indigenous tribes, specifically the Hadza tribe, and their life expectancy.
Paul explains that the Hadza tribe has high rates of maternal and infant mortality, but if they reach teenage years, their life expectancy is similar to ours. However, their health span is better, and they do not suffer from chronic diseases like we do in Western society. Paul attributes this to their diet and lifestyle, which is vastly different from ours. He explains that single-ingredient foods are king, and that we should aim to make the majority of our diet consist of these types of foods. Paul also discusses the importance of food quality and how it affects our health. The conversation also touches on the topic of hormones and the quality of meat, poultry, and fish in grocery stores. Paul explains that farm-raised fish is not a healthy option, as it accumulates pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and contaminants. He also warns against eating large wild fish like shark and swordfish, which are highly contaminated with heavy metals. Paul emphasizes the importance of being mindful of the food we eat and choosing options that are as natural and unprocessed as possible. He suggests that even wild-caught fish can have significant amounts of microplastics, and that we should be mindful of the pollutants in our food chain. Paul shares a story about the Pima Indians, who have a uniquely susceptible genetic makeup to becoming insulin resistant. 200 years ago, they had less than 1% rates of obesity and diabetes, but now those rates are over 80 to 90%. Paul thinks that if the Pima Indians were given the foods they ate 200 years ago, they would become healthier. He believes that the same thing is happening to westernized humans, who are eating westernized foods full of seed oils, refined grains, and processed sugars. Paul emphasizes that it's not hard to get off the train of insulin resistance, and that it's mostly about what we eat and how we live. Paul's own daily routine is centered around his diet and lifestyle. He wakes up early, gets sunlight, and eats a breakfast of raw goat's milk with organs and honey. He then goes surfing for a few hours before coming home and eating a breakfast of red meat, raw milk, and fruit. Paul's diet is focused on animal-based foods, including red meat, raw milk, and organs. He eats these foods throughout the day, and he notes that this way of eating has been termed animal-based by Joe Rogan. He emphasizes that this way of eating isn't for everyone, but it's a good framework for people who are looking to improve their health. Paul also prioritizes his circadian rhythm, using red lights in the evening and avoiding blue lights. He tries to be off his phone for a few hours before bed, and he meditates or reads before sleep. The conversation then shifted to the topic of EMF waves and their potential impact on human health. Paul Saladino shared his personal experience of feeling better when he's in a lower EMF environment, but acknowledged that it's challenging to conduct a single variable experiment to determine the effects of EMF on humans. Paul also discussed the differences between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation, explaining that while RF EMF is not powerful enough to be ionizing, it can still affect biological system. He shared his experience of using a device to measure RF EMF levels in his home and compared them to levels in urban environments, highlighting the significant difference. Paul emphasized the importance of considering the quality of food to minimize the risk of contamination. He also noted that while there are some risks associated with consuming raw milk, the benefits may outweigh the risks, and it's essential to be aware of the quality of the food. The conversation then shifted to the topic of seed oils, with Paul explaining that they were not part of the American food chain until the early 20th century. He noted that rates of chronic illnesses such as heart disease, stroke, and cancer were lower in the 19th century when people consumed mostly animal fat. Paul questioned the hypothesis that saturated fat causes heart disease, given the historical context. He emphasized the importance of being cautious and taking steps to reduce exposure, especially in urban environments. Paul also discussed the topic of testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, and noted that most men who go on TRT do so without addressing the underlying causes of their low testosterone. He suggested that fixing sleep and diet can often correct low testosterone levels, and that TRT should be used as a last resort.
Sean mentions that he's been making changes to his diet and is excited to share what he's learned with his wife. Paul asks about Sean's diet, and Sean mentions that he's been using the Yuka app to scan barcodes and identify unhealthy additives in his food.
Paul notes that he's not familiar with the app, but is interested in learning more.
Sean and Paul also discuss the topic of seed oils, with Paul expressing his disagreement with Gabrielle Lyon's statement that there is no proof that seed oils are bad for you.
Paul notes that seed oils have never been part of the human diet and can lead to increased oxidation of LDL, incorporation into membranes, and overactivation of the sodium-potassium pathways. He suggests that randomized controlled trials on seed oils are flawed because they were conducted during a time when trans fats were not understood to be harmful. Paul believes that many of the randomized controlled trials that claim seed oils are harmless are actually flawed. In fact, he's gone through all 11 randomized controlled trials on seed oils and broken them down, pointing out the numerous problems with each study. Saladino argues that the only way someone could conclude that seed oils are benign is if they haven't actually read the trials or don't understand how flawed they are. He points to studies like the Sydney Diet Heart Study, the Minnesota Coronary Study, and the Rose Corn Oil Trial, which all show that seed oils increase the risk of heart disease relative to saturated fats from animals. Saladino is calling for a new trial to be done, one that's free from the flaws of the previous studies. He believes that doctors and researchers need to take a closer look at the evidence and stop relying on faulty trials. He's even willing to engage in a debate with anyone who disagrees with him, saying, "Put me in the ring." When asked to simplify his message, Saladino advises people to use their intuition and eat single-ingredient foods that their great-grandmother would recognize. He says that seed oils are not on that list, and if people want to get technical, he's happy to break down the problems with the studies that claim seed oils are harmless. To access the complete 41-minute summary and unlock detailed insights for each topic discussed in the video, please subscribe to Quick Podcast Summaries on Spotify and Apple Podcasts with free trial. And later, just for the price of candy in most places. Happy listening.